Good evening, everyone. This is Mamta Sharma from HR Support Foundation, and today we bring to you the 16th episode of True Talks for Therapists, an exclusive live web series for mental health professionals on the eclectic approach. To answer our questions, we have with us Nitin Shah, founder and director, ICHARS and ICHAR Support Foundation. Welcome, Nitin, to this episode of True Talks for Therapists.
Thank you, Mamta. How are you?
I am good. And before we begin, I would once again like to remind everyone to keep liking, commenting, sharing on this episode. You can also start a watch party so that other people in the mental health community can benefit from this discussion. And if you have any questions or you seek any clarifications, please share them in the comments so that we can take them up as we go along. And just let us know that you are there by saying hi or something so that we know that all of you are there and listening. And while they do that, Nitin, so far we have been talking about working with, intense negative emotions. Yesterday we talked about fears, phobias, free-floating anxiety, and PTSD. So today, if I'm not wrong, we are going to talk about grief, anger, and guilt, right?
Yes.
Okay. So can we begin with anger first?
So, Mamta, before we begin with anger, I actually have a question for you. Yesterday, we
Okay.
did the phasphobia cure with you for lizards, right?
Yes.
Did you see a lizard? Did you notice a lizard
I
during the
haven't.
day?
No, I haven't yet seen one, found one. I don't see
Okay.
anyone.
So, I really hope that in the next couple of days before this series gets over, you would be able to see
Hmm.
at least one lizard and we would know exactly what has happened with the
Uh,
phasphobia cure with you.
exactly. Yes, yes. So are you telling me I should be on the lookout for lizards now?
I am saying right now I would like you to be on the lookout for lizards because that's only how we would know that it's worked, right?
It's good. Yeah, perfect. Perfect. Sure, definitely.
Okay. So, yes, so today we are going to talk about grief, anxiety, and grief, guilt, and anger. We will take up
Yes.
grief in detail in some time because
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the topics which has come up a couple of times during the earlier episodes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, you asked me to start with
We will
anger,
take
right?
up. Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay. So, Mamta, we had done an episode earlier where we had spoken about flip, right?
Yes.
And from that episode, we already know what is the underlying issue related to anger, don't we?
Yes. Yes.
Can you recall and tell me what causes anger generally?
So anger is an emotion that we generally experience when we think that the source of our problem is others, and even with others, when there are unfulfilled expectations or unmet expectations, so to say, then we experience anger.
Perfect. So, would it be fair to say that anger is the result of us not having our expectations fulfilled from other people in most cases?
Yes,
Yes. Which then means that the other person is either not willing or not capable of fulfilling our expectations.
correct.
In short, we are not able to accept the person, and that is what is causing the anger.
We can say that.
We can say that. Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So, if lack of acceptance is causing anger, the solution obviously is
Acceptance.
acceptance. Perfect. Now, like we discussed earlier, the problem with acceptance is twofold. One,
Mm-hmm.
people at times feel acceptance is equal to resignation.
Yes, like giving up and I can't do anything else, so I have to accept.
Correct. Now, when we talk about acceptance, that's not exactly what acceptance is. So,
Right.
what is acceptance? Is the acceptance uh, is 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 a state where you are understanding and accepting that the other person wants something that
Mm-hmm.
you are not able to give them, and that you want something that the other person is not willing to give you. So it's not that you're accepting them by rejecting yourself or rejecting them by accepting yourself. You're actually looking at acceptance at both places. You are accepting the other
Correct.
person and you're also accepting the situation. and you're also
Yes.
accepting your own expectations. What you are
Mm-hmm.
recognizing at the same time is that
Mm-hmm.
those expectations are not being fulfilled. Now, once
Mm-hmm.
you recognize this, what are the options that you have? So I have a partner, let's say, who expects me to do
Mm-hmm.
something. I expect her to do something else. Both of us
Mm-hmm.
are not willing to fulfill those expectations. What is the way out of it?
Correct.
And I am getting angry now.
Mm. So both of us are not able to. And have I communicate? So one would be to communicate to the other person, and have I tried doing it?
Perfect. So one would be to communicate to the other person. Now,
Hmm.
many a times the anger itself stops us from communicating with people clearly and effectively.
Right.
Have you noticed how there are times when we are going and speaking to our partners, we are sure about what we want to say, how we want to say it. In fact, the client will come
Mm-hmm.
and tell you when you're working with clients that, I know before I meet my partner exactly what I need to say to her or him
Hmm.
and what will
Hmm.
be the exact choice of words that I would use. But the moment I look at the person's face, I start getting angry and then they say something and then I say something. And as a result of that, the entire situation goes for a toss. We are not able to
Hmm.
talk about what I actually wanted to talk about, but we just keep getting into fights which are repetitive. Have you had clients coming in
Correct.
saying something like this to you?
Yep. A lot of times. Yes.
Yeah,
Very often. Hmm.
right. And this is also a question for all of you who are watching the video right now. How
Hmm.
many times have you had situations where a client tells you that I know what I need to say, I know how to say it, but my anger
Hmm.
just stops me from being able to initiate that conversation with my partner properly,
Hmm.
right?
Correct.
I would like to know in comments what your experience has been with this. So going forward with this, so which means that even if we have to help the client express themselves clearly, we have to help
Hmm.
them manage their anger in this case,
Correct. Correct.
right?
Hmm.
Second, many a times the client may say that we have been there, done that, shared everything. We know, both of us know exactly what we are looking for, but we are not willing to give it to each other.
Mm-hmm.
In which case, what will happen? The client would probably need to either select whether they want to
Hmm.
realign their expectations with their
Hmm.
partner and bring it
Hmm.
down to a level which their partner would be able to fulfill.
Correct.
Or do they want to probably move out of the relationship? Because there are only three options, right? That either
Hmm.
you can
Hmm.
try and work towards making it work.
Hmm.
Second is realize that the expectations you are seeking are probably not that necessary and let go of those
Mm-hmm.
expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And third is that you choose to move out of that relationship. These are the only three options,
Absolutely. True.
right? Now, and so what I do is when I'm working with a client, I would talk about these things so that the client is first clear about what the options are.
Hmm.
And then we will ask the client what would they really like to do. So I'm now working with all three scenarios one by one. In one scenario, the
Mm-hmm.
client may say that I want to move out of the
Hmm.
relationship, but I can't because
Hmm.
I don't have the confidence of being able to make it on my own.
Correct.
Then it's a confidence issue or a skill issue and not an anger issue. So that's a separate thing altogether. And we have already discussed how we work with confidence and other issues earlier,
Right. Right. Right.
right? If the client says, I want to continue in the relationship, I want to change my
Hmm.
expectations.
Hmm.
But every time I look at my partner, I realize that earlier my partner had promised me that they would do certain things. They have not been able to do it. And that
Hmm.
triggers the anger that I have. So while intellectually I want to let go of their expectation now, but the anger still keeps coming up. So then it becomes an anger
Hmm.
issue.
Correct.
And the third category where the client says that I want to see if I can communicate with my partner clearly, but the anger
Hmm.
stops me from communicating with my partner clearly. So that's again an anger issue, right?
Correct.
In both the
Hmm.
cases, the last two ones that I've referred, we would need to help the client let go of that anger.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
True.
how do we do that? Yesterday, we spoke about hypnodrama.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, day
Yes.
before yesterday,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Predominantly, that is the process that we will use, but that will come, that will be the predominant process, though it will come later. The first step would be to sit with the client and help them understand what are the benefits of either realigning their expectations or being able to communicate with their partner clearly, right?
Correct.
So the client
Hmm.
comes, describes the problem to us. We ask them to give that problem in the particular format that we have already been looking at. I feel
Hmm.
about when,
Yes.
right?
Right.
Then
Hmm.
next step is to ask them to define the future, the outcome that they are looking
Hmm.
for, and
Right.
what would be
Yes.
the future like. What will be the benefits of being able to do that.
Correct.
Next is where we will ask them what are the skills that they require, that they lack right now, which will help them either let go of the expectation
Hmm.
or be able to communicate with their partner more effectively, depending upon whatever outcome the client is choosing.
Right.
Now, these skills can be like communication skills, it can be patience, it can be um, being able to observe in the client when my partner is in the right mood so that I can have a conversation with my partner.
Hmm.
Being able to maintain my sense of calmness so that I don't get worked up. So, all of these will be examples of skills and the state that the client needs,
Hmm.
right?
Correct.
Uh,
Hmm.
if there are skills that the client needs to develop, they are not like
Hmm.
mental skills, they are behavioral skills, like being able to communicate more clearly. Then I would
Hmm. Hmm.
first
Hmm.
start working with the client in a way in which I can help them start working towards developing those skills.
Okay.
Now, once the client has those skills, then I would look at first anchoring the client. So if
Hmm.
the client says anger, I'll ask the client what will be the opposite emotion that they would like to experience when they are with their partner. If the client
Hmm.
says calmness or love, so let's say calmness. So I would first ask the client to tell me a past experience where they've experienced calmness. I'll induce them into that state, take them back to that memory, anchor that particular state, then take them into a room of their choice. So we are starting with hypnodrama now. I'm just basically doing a recap of hypnodrama that we have done
Right.
earlier
Right.
because that's
Yes.
what
Yes.
becomes the
You
basis of
explained. Yeah.
anger management,
Correct.
right? Then we invite the client imagines themselves in the room of their choice. The client
Hmm.
imagines the other person coming into the room. They express everything that they would like to express to the other person. And once
Hmm.
they've expressed themselves completely and they've vented
Hmm.
out all the emotions, then we use the
Hmm.
anchors, help them experience the calmness. So we've helped them release the anger. We have used
Hmm.
the calmness anchor. We have replaced that anger with
Correct.
calmness. And now you will do the future
Correct.
pacing,
Perfect.
right?
Right. Got it.
Uh,
Yeah.
and then on a weekly basis, we will get in touch with the client and check if there are additional skills that they need to deal with. Are there other emotional things that are coming up? But predominantly, anger management with someone specific will be dealt with in this way.
Okay. All right.
Many a times, hypnodrama in a single session can do things that therapies may not be able to do in like months if you do it
Mm-hmm.
properly. Okay.
Right.
Obviously, but before you do hypnorama, you will do at least one more session to be able to understand the problem, the outcome, and the benefits of resolving that particular problem.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah. This is
Right.
exactly as what we discussed earlier, day before yesterday. Working with one person, multiple emotions, maybe multiple
Yes.
situations.
Right. Right. Got that. Uh, okay. We have some questions here, Nitin.
Hmm.
Lakshmi is saying I had an experience with a colleague. She, I think, was referring to, when you said the anger is so high that you're not even able to communicate. I think at that point she commented this. Nikita is saying sometimes it is, I know what to say and I also know what the response would be. Upasana is saying, yes, sometimes when I initiate a conversation for resolving an issue, it seems to others that I'm shouting. The whole point is lost in my expression, I suppose. And Jagrati is a question. How to train the client to be more assertive? Any technique? When you are low on patience, as well as when the other person doesn't want to understand the other point of view and gets stuck with their mindset.
Okay. So, hello everyone. First, hi. I
Mm-hmm.
hope uh, we are going to have another session where all of us would find it useful and interesting to come to the statements and the questions now.
Yeah.
So, uh, first, just a second, let me just check. All right. So Nikita had mentioned that sometime it is that I know what to say and I also know what the response would be. So Nikita, that is the
Absolutely.
thing, that what we say and what other people say is like, it's like a game going on where I make a move and the other person makes a corresponding move, right? And if
Counter move.
every time I'm going to make the same move, the other person eventually ends up making the same move also. So when you
Correct.
know that there is a particular situation where whatever you say triggers a particular response from the person, which is which you can like understand already in advance, and you know that response is not helping you resolve the problem, then the idea would be for you to find a better way of being able to talk to the other person. And that's also what we do with clients. So many a times clients come and tell me that, Nitin, I have been working with my partner. I've tried going and telling her very assertively that this is what we want and this is what we don't want, and yet she would then get into an argument, and every time I know exactly the verbatim argument that she will put up, right? So I asked him, and every time when you go and tell her, do you also go and tell her the same thing in the same assertive way? He mentioned yes. Now he's basically saying that I and my partner are both being predictable with each other. So I asked the client, all right, instead of being assertive, is there something else that you can do? Right? Let's not look at resolving a problem for a moment. What else can you do when you're with your partner while you're having a conflict? He thought, and then he told me, Nitin, now that I think of it, maybe I can just try hugging my partner and see what happens. Now imagine a client is telling me in the middle of a conflict, can I hug my partner? This is a new strategy that they've not tried earlier. Something that the partner is not predicting, something that the partner is not prepared for. In the next session, when he came, he told me that, Nitin, last session I went home. After that, a couple of days later, we were having a fight, and in the middle of the fight, I went close to her, I hugged her, and I don't know why, but I actually told her that, you know what, fights apart, I love you a lot, and I'm glad that you're in my life. And he says, the moment I said that, the expression of shock on my wife's face was worth everything, because it was almost like this is out of syllabus. She wasn't prepared for that. And because she went
Right.
quiet, she was in shock. He then said, then I told her that, I understand probably there are certain things that I'm doing which are not working for you. I understand that probably there are certain things that I am not happy about. Let's talk about it after 15 minutes when both of us are feeling comfortable. And they were actually able to have a very meaningful conversation about whatever problems they had. Obviously, this will not work for every client, but I'm just giving an example in terms of when you already know what your partner is going to say. That means that there is a lot of predictability in the way you guys are trying to handle a situation, or the clients are trying to handle a situation, and that predictability needs to change. In fact, it's so funny that there was a time when I think I had a client, husband wife, coming for a session. While they were walking into the session, both of them were actually fighting with each other. So when they stepped into the room, I asked them, how long have you been fighting with each other? The I think the husband told me that for the last 1.5 hours. I said, no, I don't mean how long as in how long today, but in general, for how much time have you been fighting with each other? The wife told me that, Nitin, we have been together for what, 4 years, and we have been fighting for the last 3 years. I said, all right. So on an average, on a daily basis, how long do you fight? One of them responded by saying around 1.5, 2 hours every day. So imagine 1.5, 2 hours every day they have been fighting for last 3 years. I asked them, do you fight about different topics or do you fight about the same topics? The husband and the wife looked at me and they said, you know what? We fight about the same thing because the other person is just not willing to understand. So it's the same fight that keeps happening on a daily basis. Okay. So I asked them, do you fight using the exact same words or different set of words? And they're like, you know how it is when you're fighting, like it's the same automatic conversation that we are having. It's almost like um, we are using the same set of arguments. So I said, so why not just record it once and listen to it every day? And the two of them looked at me with this expression on their face. They're like, what? And I said, but that's exactly what you're doing. I'm just asking you to do it more efficiently. You will save more energy. Now, remember, I actually have a kind of a relationship with most of my clients where I get away with a lot of things that I tell them simply because of what we have done earlier in terms of establishing a rapport. So both of them look at me and they have this sheepish kind of a smile on their face. And they're like, we know what you are saying, and that's why we are coming to you, right? So I said, good. Now that you're here, tell me one, what, how much time would you save if you were not fighting with each other every day? The answer was simple, around 1.5 to 2 hours. I asked them, what will you do if not fight during these 1.5, 2 hours? They looked at me and they told me, we don't know. Many times when people are fighting with each other, they're also fighting with each other because that's their favorite pastime. They don't really know what would they do with each other if they were not fighting. It might sound ridiculous. It actually is ridiculous, but that's also the truth. So many a times you want to, while you're working with anger and frustration and whatever other feelings that the clients are feeling, you also want to be able to work with coming up with new strategies in terms of how they would communicate with each other, how they would express to each other, how they would spend the time with each other. That can play a very, very important role in working with anger and especially relationships, right? So Nikita, when you are saying that, I would also suggest that please check if there are certain things that you can change in the way you are initiating a conversation with those people. All
Okay.
right. And then Upasana said that sometimes I'm having a conversation and people think that I'm shouting. So that's actually true, and that's where we make. That's where I was talking about skills. I've had people in therapy coming and telling me that Nitin, I talk very loudly, and when I'm passionate about something, my volume increases automatically. It's not that I'm shouting, it's not that I'm angry, it's just that that's the way I talk. You know, there are ways in which we can learn to talk in a slightly different way if the earlier way is not working. And that's where skill building comes in. That's where processes in therapy will come in.
Right.
We help the client be able to talk about the exact same thing using
Hmm.
a softer volume, a softer pace, if the louder one is not working for them. And I've also had the other way around where clients come and say that I talk very softly and the other person thinks that they can take me for a ride. So I just probably need to learn to talk a bit more loudly, a bit more clearly, a bit more assertively. And we can also do that.
Right.
Right? So that's where the right style of expression comes in. When we are talking about anger and expression, we are not talking about just expressing your anger. What's important is how effectively are you able to express it, and that effectiveness of expression is a lot more important than expression itself.
Okay.
Then,
Perfect.
which leads us to Jagriti's question. In
Hmm.
fact, so all of your comments have been like really in sequence. I'm able to go from one comment to another, leading to the next thing that I want to cover. So, since I spoke about assertiveness, and now Jagriti has asked that how do we help people become more assertive? So, Jagriti, the
Hmm.
way I would work with assertiveness is I would ask the client to tell me a past situation in their life where they have been assertive with anyone. It need not be their partner with whom they have a problem right now, but any person in their life that they've ever been assertive with. There would generally be at least one person in their life with whom they have been assertive and they have been effectively assertive. I would take that as a modeling opportunity to ask the client to look back and define and tell me what all do they notice uh, in terms of skills that they applied for assertiveness that they are not able to apply right now when they are with their partner. Now, what this does is it makes the client realize that it's not that they are not assertive. They have used assertiveness in the past with other people. It's just that they are not able to use the same assertiveness with specific people that they want to use now. That changes a lot of things because now it's not about developing a skill, it's about applying an existing skill that they already have. And there, anchoring and future pacing may actually be all that you need. Having said that, there is a possibility where the client may say that I've never ever been assertive with anyone in my life. Unlikely, but possible.
Right.
So I would then ask
Right.
the client, can you think of someone else in your life who has been assertive? Who you think is not just assertive, but is assertive effectively. They know when to be assertive, how to be assertive, and they're able to play with their volume, tone exactly the way you would like to do in future so that you are able to resolve your problems. Now, or
Right.
handle situations better. Once I have the client sharing an example of a role model or a person that they can model, right? I would first ask the client to close their eyes and imagine a couple of scenarios where they've noticed the other person handling situations assertively and effectively. it's highly unlikely that a client tells you that I don't have even one person in my life who has been assertive with me or with someone else. So that becomes a reference point for us. From there, I can identify what skills the client lacks, what skills the client needs. If the skills are behavioral skills, for example, there are places where clients would tell you that uh, I, I I don't have the right vocabulary to be able to talk to the other person. Then you have to go into language training and vocabulary training. But in most cases, people will tell you skills which are mental skills. For example, I just need to have the patience, or I need to be able to listen more clearly and effectively, or I need to be able to maintain a state of calmness, or that I need to be
Right.
able to remain confident.
Right.
Now, all of these are states and mental skills, right? All of this can be developed and taken care of with the help of anchoring. So the technique that I would use with a client to be able to help them develop assertiveness, uh, or calmness, or patience, or confidence would all boil down to anchoring in this case. I hope that
Perfect.
answers your question, Jagriti.
Yeah. Nitin, there are some more comments.
Hmm.
Upasna is saying, taking a moment to appreciate your work. It's really helpful in dealing with practical problems that come our way in therapy.
Thank you, Pasna. That's exactly the purpose of why we are doing it right now.
And
Uh,
Nikita has a question. What when the other person doesn't communicate or keeps mum?
so, Nikita, so in NLP, there's a presupposition that communication is redundant, or another way of saying it is that we are communicating 24/7. So when a person doesn't communicate, what we are basically saying is they are not communicating verbally, right? But the absence of verbal conversation also communicates a lot of things to us. The idea is to be able to keep looking at different ways in which you can communicate, because unless you know the way that will work, you will have to keep trying. It's like trial and error, right? So to give you an example, let's say, Mamta, have we discussed love languages in any of the episodes for therapists?
No. In fact, I was about to say that an understanding of sexuality and love languages is, I think, what is required to answer this question.
Okay, so I'm covering a topic called love languages quickly, so that you can understand what I'm trying to say. So there's a book called Five Love Languages by Gary Chapman, and he mentions in that book that people understand and express love in five different ways. And the problem between two people in a relationship is rarely love or absence of love. It's generally the understanding of how the other person expresses and understands love.
Correct.
Now, what I mean by this is that Chapman says that there are five love languages. Mamta, do you remember what those five love languages are? Can you quickly
Yes,
recap
yes,
them?
of course. Okay. So, in no particular order, these are first words of affirmation. So there are people who would like to express their love or affection through words, so by saying it out aloud, something like I love you, I'm there for you, you mean a lot to me. So they would express by saying it out. Then there are people who would express their love through um, what do we call that, acts of service, right? So they would like to do things for you. These are people that, let's say you come home tired, and they would immediately make a cup of tea even without you asking for it, or you telling them explicitly that I need it. Who would basically do things for you. They are like the magical elves in the background who ensure that you have things that you need, and you are comfortable and everything. Then there are people who are who express themselves, who express their love through physical touch and intimacy. So these are huggy, feely people who like to, people who like to hug you a lot, hold hands, pat you on the shoulder. So that is their way of expressing love. Then there are people who would like to spend quality time with their partners. Again, the definition of quality time would vary from person to person, because but then quality time generally means that both the partners should be completely focused on each other and not doing anything else, but completely be with each other in that moment. And then, of course, there are people who like to express their love through gifts. And when it comes to gifts, we all know that what matters most is it should be a surprise. The recipient should like it. It should be very carefully wrapped in a in a bright, colorful, very interesting wrapping paper. And the value of the gifts, is dependent on this and not actually the monetary value. So different people express their love through different things, as we saw. I mean, one of these five things, all of us have like to do a bit of each, but then there would be a predominant way of expressing love. And the interesting thing about love languages is that the way we express love is usually also the way we expect it from our partners. So that's the idea of love languages.
Perfect. And the thing is that what Mamta mentioned in the end, that we expect our partners to give us love in exactly the same manner in which we receive it, is where a lot of times conflict happens. Now, what do I mean by this? So let's say, so for example, for me, words are very important. I like saying I love you. I love hearing I love you, right? But my partner generally is not someone who's as much into words. She would like to do a lot of things. She would make a cup of tea, or she would take care of the food, or matlab, she would keep things ready, right? Initially, when we got married, it was very difficult because I just wouldn't be able to figure out why am I being given a cup of tea without me asking that I need cup of tea, right? Matlab, especially when let's say I had a fight with someone outside, I came home, and my partner would look at me and would just go make a cup of tea or make a glass of cold coffee and give it to me. And I would keep wondering, I never asked for it. Why are you giving it to me? Why can't you just sit next to me and tell me I love you? And she wouldn't. And when she had a problem, I would actually go and tell her I love you. Now, the problem with this was, when I would tell her I love you, especially when she had a problem, she would look at me and she would tell me, so what do I do about it? And for me, that was like really difficult to hear initially, because I'm wondering, like, she can't say I love you to me, and when I'm saying it, it doesn't mean to her. What are we doing in this relationship? It took me time to realize that for her, words are not important. When I actually would say I love you to her while she was angry, she would actually feel more angry. And in my case, because acts of service were not important, words were more important. I am just expecting her to say I love you to me even in the middle of the fight. It was only when we understood this and we recognized this. So today, for example, now that I know that she doesn't really uh, say I love you so frequently, so even when she doesn't say I love you, I understand that when she's making a cup of tea or when she's doing certain things for me, I recognize and realize that that's her way of expressing love. So I'm bringing to change my expectation in terms of how love needs to be expressed to me. Having said that, there are places where I'm in a really bad mood, and probably that's not the time where I would be able to figure out that she's making a cup of tea for me, because I'm already in a really bad mood, right? That's the place where she recognizes and she remembers to come and tell me I love you, because she realizes that I'm not in the right state for me to be able to analyze, interpret, and come to a conclusion that she loves me. I would just prefer to hear it. And the moment she says this to me, I feel a lot more calm. So just like love languages, uh, that's also true with almost everything else when we communicate with our partners. And love language is only one example of communication where you're communicating love. There are places where some people like talking more, some people like talking less. There are people who would like to discuss the problem when they are in a problem, and there are others who would rather want to take some time out, think about it, and then talk about it quickly, not stretch it too much. There are people who would like to address a problem in front of a larger audience. There are people who would want to address this problem in a really close, probably one-to-one setup. So it's just that as an individual, we need to be able to understand how the other person that we are interacting with understands and communicates. And the onus of being able to communicate more clearly and effectively is on me, because I want to improve that communication. I just need to figure out the right way of working with that. That's the exact same thing that I do with clients. So with clients, I would actually explain love languages to them first. Once they've understood love languages, that gives me a starting point to talk to them about how different people understand things in different ways, and you need to communicate in their language, which they agree with. And then I can ask them to look at what are the places where they've spoken something and their partner has been able to agree with them, understand them. And that's where then we would start bringing in those changes in terms of strategies that they use with their partner. I hope that answers your question, Nikita. Jagriti is also asked, can we introduce these love languages to the client? I do. So
Yes.
whenever I'm working with relationship issues, there are. So I think I'd shared earlier. We have a relationship module online called Ultimate Guide to Love, Dating, and Relationship,
Mhm.
which I generally recommend all my clients of relationship issues to go through. It actually explains all of this in detail, which saves me a lot of time. And once the client has gone through that, it becomes a lot more easier because they're already in a receptive state where they recognize that there are things that they can do to be able to change the current status of their relationship. Um, but love languages, hypnotic sexuality, suggestibility, NLP representation systems. These are four topics that I would introduce to clients when they are working with relationships. But this is by default what I would introduce to them, and then anything else that comes up.
Perfect.
Right? So this becomes like a part of my introductory session with the client. In fact, I don't know if we have announced this. We are also launching next week the relationship counseling module online, which means that any of you who wants to master how to work with clients who have relationship issues via online counseling and online coaching, that program will basically be meant for them. It will be a certification program. If any of you are interested, you can please feel free to get in touch with us.
Okay.
I've also
Perfect.
shared a link for love languages. That basically is a link which will give you a lot more detail about love languages than what we've just spoken about right now.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you, Nitin.
Thank you.
Okay, so I don't see any other question. Oh, there is. Okay, someone is saying thank you. Nikita is saying yes. Jagriti said thank you. Okay.
Good.
All right. So that was about anger, right?
Correct. Any other questions that we have about anger from anyone else? So let's move to the next one, and if they have any questions, then I'll address that
We can come back.
towards you. Correct.
Right. Okay. So Nitin, moving to guilt. How do we work with guilt?
All right. So again, one is to look at whether the guilt is rational or irrational. When I say rational, it means does the client feel they have a justified reason to feel guilty? If they do, then we go to the flip model. Remember the flip model again?
Yes, again. Yes, yes.
And in the flip model, we had discussed how guilt is a result of us making a mistake because our mind does not want us to repeat the same mistake again.
Correct. Right.
Right? Perfect. So the best way of helping us get over guilt is to be able to learn from that mistake and ensure that our mind is clearly aware of the fact that we will not make the same mistake again. We have a new strategy in place,
Correct.
right? So there is a process called perceptual position that can be used both with guilt and anger. Now, what perceptual position does is it basically helps you look at the entire situation from a third person's point of view. If any of you have done CBT or REBT, it's also called the fly on the wall technique or the helicopter process. In NLP, it's called perceptual position. Just a normal Google search on perceptual position would probably help you see a lot of videos on it. I'll also share a link with all of you on perceptual position. I think we have already got an article of it on Archa's website. But it basically means that you're looking at situation from a first person's point of view, from your point of view. Then you relive that situation from the point of view of the second person, and then from an independent point of view, like equidistance from both the people who are having a conflict.
Right.
That's very useful when you look at it from an anger point of view because you understand all three perspectives.
Perfect.
If you're working with guilt, then generally looking at it from your point of view and a third person's point of view is good enough um, to be able to help you understand what you could have done differently, right? And
Right.
then you can use future pacing, and you could just use like normal visualization about future, where in the same situations they are using the new strategies and getting the results that they would like to get, rather than depending upon the old strategies that were creating or inducing guilt. Now, this is
Okay.
if the guilt is uh,
Rational.
rational. The problem with guilt is people can feel guilty about everything and anything, and at times guilt can be highly irrational. Matlab, I've had clients who at times would tell me that I feel guilty about spending time with my family because then I feel I'm not giving them space, and if I'm not spending time with them, then I feel guilty that I'm not spending time with them. So it's like if I do, then also damned. If I don't do, then also damned. And that's one of the big concerns as far as
Guilt.
guilt is concerned. Now, in such a case, generally speaking, there is, we discussed inner child in the in last episode, right? So it's generally that some part of us is holding on to kind of an anger towards ourselves. It's like one part of us is blaming another part of us for something that's gone wrong.
Right.
So we can do a combination of hypnodrama and inner child, where we ask the client to go into the room and then invite the child in them who's angry with them, and then allow the child to express everything that the child wants to express to them.
Perfect.
So, and then eventually, once the child is able to express all of that to the client, then the child can release whatever remaining negative emotions they have, grow up to the current age, feel safer, lighter, more comfortable. You can add more things and suggestions to make them feel really good, really happy, and then eventually integrate with the client. So, with guilt, it's like hypnodrama plus inner child can be very effective.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. Nitin, a few questions. Bhakti is saying, asking control over repeated anger for teenager, how to tackle.
Okay. So,
And there's another question about a teenager. Should I tell you
हाँ
that?
बोल दीजिए,
Huh.
हाँ बोल दीजिए.
Jagriti is saying, I have a client who is 14 years old and a boy is having increased anger issues because his father used to beat him a lot, and now his aggression has reached a level that the immediate emotion he feels when anything goes against his expectation or anything bad, like classmates making joke of him, he beats up the other person. How to go with this? What to do about this?
Okay. So when you're working with anger, both with teenagers and adults, if it was a really small, if it was like a smaller child, I would probably have told you something else. But with teenagers and adults, there is a way where, in most cases, you can directly work with them. But in case of the 14-year-old Jagriti that you've mentioned, the father used to beat him up is the key word, because if the father is still beating him up, the way to work with it would change. I'm right now giving you the response in terms of assuming that the parents have some senses put into their head and they've recognized that what they're doing with the children is not working and they're willing to change that. Now, if that's possible and if parents have started changing and yet the child is holding on to that anger, then there are a couple of things that we will do. I would actually sit with the child to first understand how is the anger affecting the child. What problems is the anger creating in the child's life? I don't want to begin by telling a child, I want you to let go of the anger. Because the moment I say that, they already think that I'm in the parents' team. And that's not a good team to be in if you want to work with a child.
Right.
Right? So I would generally ask the child that, all right, now that you're here, and while your parents have told me that you experience a lot of anger, how is that anger affecting you in your life?
Okay.
Any child who's experiencing anger would tell you that while they feel justified to have the anger, it's also creating a problem for them. Maybe their friends are no longer as close to them, or they keep getting reprimanded by their school, or keep getting scolded by their parents. Something or the other would be happening in the child's life which bothers the child. They may feel justified to have that anger, but still the child realizes that that anger is creating a problem for them. And I want to establish that only after the child recognizes this, that the problem is creating the anger is creating a problem for me as well. Only then is when the child will be willing to support you. So that's the first part. Once the child is willing to support you with that, then I would look at a couple of things. One, to help the child release the stored anger that they have, in which case I would generally use metaphor based processes. So I would do actually a combination of hypnodrama and metaphor. With a 14-year-old child, you can do hypnodrama. 14, 15-year-old, that should not be a problem. So I would induce them into a mild hypnotic state, take them into a room, imagine the father coming in, and express whatever anger they have towards the father, and replace it with calmness and so on, and do a future pacing. So here the process remains the same. This is assuming, and this is the key thing, that the father or the other person has mended their ways. If
Jagriti
that's
is
not
saying
happened,
still beating.
correct. Now, if that's not happened, then obviously the child does not come to you for therapy out of their own violation. They have been brought to you for therapy. So I would speak to the person who has brought the child for therapy. Generally, it will be the mother or the father. If the father is beating up, generally father would not bring the child, the mother would bring the child. To act as a protective cover for the child. And if the mother says that I can't because the father is very aggressive and I can't stop him, he beats me also, then I would work with the mother to develop the skills and the capabilities to be able to stand up against the husband so that she can protect the son. And the reason why that's important is because no matter what work I do with the child may let go of the anger during the process. But when they go back home and the father beats them again, they will feel angry again. And this will become like a repetitive cycle, and eventually the child would lose trust even in what we are doing with them. So if I have to work with the child, in this case, I would need at least one person in the family to work with me along with the child. And I generally make it mandatory, and I've rarely had issues where people have not agreed. Eventually, one of the parent agrees and recognizes that, yeah, I understand that I also need to work with that. Because imagine if the wife is telling you that my partner beats me up also. They are also facing a problem, right? So eventually, you basically end up helping both of them resolve those problems. And I've also had a couple of cases where a wife, in this case, says that I don't want to take that chance. If he beats up the husband, if the child, he beats up the child, I can't do anything about it. So then I tell the client that, then there is not much that I can help you with simply because that's the situation. Exception to this, lastly, is a child that had come to me for a session around 15, and she had the same issue that the father would beat her up and so on. When I asked her, what would you like to do? She said, Nitin, I just want to go to a hostel. Once I go to a hostel, my life will be sorted.
Right.
I asked her, in order for you to go to a hostel, what needs to be done?
Perfect.
Right? In that case, she said that, because my father gets angry, he beats me up, then I also start throwing things around. So they feel I'm very immature, and they keep saying that agar main aisa karungi, so they would never send me to a hostel. So if I'm able to maintain my calmness in front of my father, uh, I don't know whether he'll stop beating me or not, but it will at least increase my chances of going to the hostel. And I think that's a chance that I'm willing to, but that's what I would like to work with. And I was able to work with her. So her aim was for the next 6 months. I want to be in a state where, one, as far as possible, I can avoid my father so that he doesn't beat me up. When I'm in front of my father, I should be able to recognize when he's in the bad mood so that I don't say anything that will trigger that anger even more. And third, eventually, even if he starts fighting with me, for me to remain calm so that it doesn't reach a place where he's so angry that he beats me up. And if I can do that in the next few months, I probably would have a chance to apply to the hostel. And she was able to do that. So you just have to find what the motivation for the child is in that case.
Right. Right. Perfect. That makes sense. Nidhi is saying if someone feels guilty because the partner makes them feel so, otherwise they are normal. For example, the partner always complains that the spouse isn't working hard enough. Then how does one handle such a person?
See, when we say that I'm feeling guilty because my partner is making me feel that guilty, my personal experience has been there would be something internally that is reciprocating with the response that the partner is giving. But there are so many things that our partners say, right? I don't get affected by all of them. No one gets affected by all of them. We know what things to ignore and what things to just let it pass by.
Right.
But there are things that do pinch us. They are pinching us because at some level, probably we are also agreeing with that knowingly or unknowingly. So I want to work with the client to first understand that what is happening in them, what in them allows them to get instigated by it. Now, in this case, there are two possibilities. One can be that the client agrees that what my partner is saying is actually right. I also feel I'm not doing enough, but I've tried everything and I'm not able to. Then the process is not as much about guilt, but about helping them do what they feel they need to do. Alternatively, the client may say that, I don't agree with my partner, but my partner reminds me of exactly how my father used to behave with me or my family members used to behave with me. And that triggers a lot of guilt that I have from earlier.
Right.
Right? For example, I married the wrong person. My parents had told me that you shouldn't have got married to this person. Got married to him or her. And now when he says that, while he's making me feel guilty about something else, I feel guilty about the fact that I did not listen to my parents.
Right.
Then that's what I would work. I hope that kind of answers your question.
Yes. Let us know, Nidhi, if you got your answer. Nikita is saying, how do you handle a client who is not willing to take medication when it is very important to have medical treatment. They just want to have counseling.
Okay. So when I have worked with clients and they have said no for medicines, as in for psychiatric medicines, that's generally been that they have been very afraid of the fact that they would get addicted to the medicine. And there is so much of information available now, and so many people have mentioned that they had got addicted to the medicine when they were taking psychiatric medicine and so on, that people start feeling that every psychiatric medicine is bad and that we should not take it. It will only create a problem. So what I
Right.
do with the client is I actually tell them that I will only work with you if you take the medicine, but I promise to you that we will work in a way in which your symptoms start reducing so that your psychiatrist can begin to see the difference and start tapering off and reducing the medicines. And I've
Perfect.
almost with all the clients where I've worked with, where I've had clients who were taking psychiatric medicines and also working with me, over a period of time, the psychiatrist has noticed the improvement in their condition and has tapered down and reduced the medications to a large extent. Well, either it would have completely gone away, or even if they are taking medications in certain cases, the medications are in controlled quantity, which would not really lead to any of the side effects that generally it leads to.
Great. Great. Okay. Supriya is asking if the client is epileptic and under medication, is it okay to use hypnodrama or any therapy for release of anger? If no, what precautions need to be taken?
So, with people who have epilepsy or who have low blood pressure, inducing them in a relaxed state has a potential to further lower the blood pressure or to cause an epileptic attack, right? So,
Okay.
no deep relaxation based processes should be attempted with these people. But
Mm-hmm.
deep relaxation processes don't necessarily, hypnosis doesn't always necessarily mean that you have to induce a deep relaxed state. You could work with the client conversationally where they can actually do this through drama, through role playing, through a lot of other ways. So you could use variations of this. You can actually give them, for example, what do we call them? You know, there are these small uh, characters that you can give people, kids play with them. I don't remember the exact name that we use for them, right? Or dolls. So you could give them those and let them like have conversations based on that. Now, generally, this is used with kids, but if the client is willing, even with adults, this can actually work out quite interesting.
Okay.
So I
Nitin,
would do the same thing as hypnodrama. I would just do it not in a relaxed state, but probably with their eyes open or through uh, puppets or something on those lines.
all right. All right. Perfect. Makes sense. Nuzhat is saying, my son has anger issues. He's 13 years old. In his childhood, he had seen physical and mental torture on his mother by the father. Though now I'm been living single for last 11 years, so father is not there in the picture, but that the son is still angry. How to handle him?
So Nusrat, generally speaking, when it's your own child, I would actually suggest take them to another therapist. I'm still sharing what can be done. Actually, what can be done is exactly what I've shared earlier with the 14-year-old child. The process will more or less remain the same. But I would still suggest you should not be doing it. It's better if someone else who's a neutral therapist does the process with the child.
Fair enough.
I hope that answers your question.
Yes. While Nuzhat lets us know, I think we have answered all questions. Supriya has got her answer. She's saying, Nidhi is saying she's got her answer. Okay, all right. So while others ask their questions, Nitin, now that we understand more about anger and guilt and how to deal with it, what about grief?
All right. So, disclaimer before I go ahead, we are again
Yes.
going to go overshoot the time. We will at least need 15-20 minutes uh, before
Okay.
to complete grief.
And we have
Right?
another question on that
All
note.
right.
Nikita is asking, how do you convince a PD client for the same who feels nothing is wrong with them, but at times they are very difficult to handle by parents as they become more aggressive and throw tantrums? And Nusrat is saying thank you, so probably she's got her answer. But the
Okay.
Nikita's question.
So, Nikita, I see. So the thing is, when I'm working with clients, I actually don't go into labels. So I wouldn't call a client a PD client. I understand you're sharing it in terms of a session discussion, but the reason I'm saying this is because many a times label make us biased as practitioners. and then we feel very limited when we are working with clients. My approach to working with all clients, and this includes in many cases what are known as PD clients also, that I would actually sit with the client and understand what is the challenge that they are facing. So to an extent, for example, there was a partner who was brought, who did not want to come for a therapy, but who was brought for a therapy by their partner. The client said that I get angry because my partner does things, and I think it's justified to have that anger. There is nothing wrong with me, and everything is fine. Right? Now, when the client said that to me, I asked him, all right, so now that you feel that everything is fine, and yet you're being brought over here for a session, how does that make you feel? And the response was, it makes me feel angry. And what will happen because of this anger now that you're angry? Would this lead to some conflict between you and your partner? The client said, yes, obviously it will lead to some conflict between her. After I go back from it, I'm going to fight with her again that this is all useless. I said, brilliant. And what if I could help you ensure that you don't have that conflict with your partner? Would that be useful for you? And he said, so you're saying I would not feel as bad about coming over here as I feel right now. And I would not have a conflict with her even if I tell her that I don't want to continue for a session. I said, whatever is the outcome that you're looking for, I can help you with that. And that's the problem that they started working with, that, you know what, while I understand that I feel angry because of what my partner does, but that anger is still affecting me in certain ways and I want to work with that. And we were still able to work with that. So for me, the priority is to bring it back to the client. I want to understand from the client, how is the client feeling because of what is happening in their life, which includes them being brought for a session without their will. And every client who is brought to you for a therapy, when they don't want to come to you for a therapy, if nothing else, at least that is bothering them. I can start with that as a issue that we can help them resolve.
Right. Got that. I hope you've got your answer, Nikita. Acha, Upasna, again talking about, I think, referring to your answer on epilepsy, Upasna is saying, please say more about the same situation in pseudo seizures. I think she's referring to that example.
So, Upasna, how should I put it? When we are working with pseudo seizures, there are two levels of work. One is whatever is the effect of the seizure that they are experiencing, which may be leading to their own stress and anxiety and all of that. And second is what is the psychological cause behind the seizure. Now, as I said, all the hypnotic process that we've spoken about, where deep relaxation is involved, I would not use it with a client if the client has seizures. Okay. But what I can do is I would work with a specialist who works with seizures, and in their presence may work with mild hypnotic states and help the client identify what the deeper issues or psychological issues are. Have I worked with a client like this ever? So there is a friend of mine uh, who would have these issues. I did not really take a therapy, so I wouldn't classify it as a therapy. But I would say what I did with him. So what we did was we did not go through the deep, intense hypnotic processes or relaxation processes. We actually bypassed that into using dreams, where I had actually told him that in your dream, your unconscious will be able to help you understand what is the underlying issue that you need to work with. They were able to come and give me the answer, and then we were able to work with those issues. So I actually use dreams as a means to get answers rather than using hypnosis over there. But alternatively, if the client cannot do that, or if you feel that there's a risk that even in dream they may end up having a seizure, then what I would do is probably sit with them with their eyes open, work with certain processes which will help them identify deeper issues, psychological issues. I could do a positive intention process. I could also do the inner child process, the ego states process that we spoke about a couple of sessions back, where I would invite the part in them which understands what the psychological cause of the problem is, and then have a conversation with that part. But the entire thing will happen with their eyes open, not in a deeply relaxed state, in a hypnotic state, but not in a relaxed state. I hope that gives you an answer.
Right. Right. Let us know, Upasna, if you have your answer. Anu is saying one of my client, which you know, what you were mentioning, exactly the same case. my client feels guilty because she made the wrong decision regarding marriage. Her mother didn't want her to marry a person she loved the most. Against her wishes, she got married to that person. After 4 5 years, mother died, and after 17 years of marriage, her husband divorced her. Now she feels guilty.
Okay. So when she's saying that she's feeling guilty, I would like to understand what is the guilt about. In the sense, is the guilt about the mother dying and she not listening to the mother, or she getting married and having a divorce? Uh, if it's about the mother, that the mother died and I did not listen to her and I feel guilty that I did not listen to her, then you can do a hypnodrama with the mother. So basically, she has not got a closure with the mother in terms of being able to probably say sorry or say whatever she wants to say to the mother. That's what I would probably do over there. If it's about the marriage ending, then the process would be slightly different. So I would still use hypnodrama to be able to work with your husband or ex-husband in this case, so that she can let go of whatever emotion she has associated with it. With guilt, it is generally speaking.
She's saying her mother because she didn't listen.
Oh, okay. So if her mother died because she didn't listen, then I would do a hypnodrama with a dead mother, and it would then go into the category of grief more than guilt. So give me like 5 minutes, and I'm not even 5 minutes, maybe another 2 3 minutes if there are no other questions, and I'm moving to grief, and I'm going to explain how we work with grief after that.
And Nitin, in this case, it would also, I believe, help to supplement what you said with a ho'oponopono kind of a process.
See, it just all depends upon what outcome is the client looking for, right? Eventually, that's the end objective. Now, if the client says that my guilt and my whatever other feelings are associated to multiple people, then Hoponopono will be very useful. But if it's only associated to either husband or mother, then probably hypnodrama would be better because it's faster to that extent and it's specifically dealing with one issue that they are addressing. Also, you could modify hypnodrama to bring in the Hoponopono process as a part of hypnodrama itself.
Correct.
Matlab,
Right.
I can help the client do the hypnodrama, and after that say I love you to the partner, say I'm sorry to the partner, say I forgive you to the partner and to themselves, and also say thank you. So it can kind of be clubbed together, and that's what we mean by eclectic approach, right? That we are not
Perfect.
sticking to one technique. We are like really
Right.
looking at mixing and merging
Right.
in
Right.
terms
Right.
of what needs to be done.
Got it. Okay. So coming to grief now.
All right. So grief is best explained as a state of sorrow which people are experiencing because they've lost something, and is generally associated to death of someone who is loved.
Right.
Right? Now, the reason why grief is a bit tricky is because grief involves us going through multiple stages, and we can get stuck in any stage.
Right.
Right? So, I think I mentioned this earlier that there's a book by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross titled "On Death and Dying," in which she has mentioned the 5 stages. Right?
Yes.
Uh, we have like slightly modified version of the stages. So I'm going to talk about the stages that we work with, but that from a therapy point of view gives us really good results.
Okay.
So the stages in grief or when we lose something, first stage is generally denial,
Right.
where we are not willing to acknowledge or believe that something has been lost.
Right.
Second stage is anger,
Hmm.
where we are assigning a blame to something or someone because of which we have lost whatever we
Right.
have lost.
Right.
Third is a sense of helplessness and depression, because even if you acknowledge and understand that what has been lost, now
Hmm.
you are worried about the consequences of losing it.
Correct.
Then comes the bargain where we start looking at, all right, now that what's gone is gone, how can I get on with my life? What do I want to live for? What do I want to change for?
Right.
And eventually, once I'm able to apply that bargain into practice, it becomes acceptance that I'm also getting the results and the change that I'm looking for.
Right.
Right? So, and remember the keyword is we are talking about loss that is perceived as loss by the client. So, for example, if someone passes away and you're happy because they've passed away, as their entire property comes to you, probably that would not be classified as a loss or a grief situation.
Hmm.
Right? or if you have kind of lost a mobile phone and you are thinking chalo gaya acha hai naya aayega, then that will not be classified as a loss. A loss is a loss when you perceive it as a loss, so the client perceives it as a loss. So uh, it's something of value that they would have preferred not to lose. Obviously the most intense of that becomes death of someone who's a loved one.
Correct.
Right now,
Right.
to give you an example of this, so even when people are in hospitals and they've been in hospitals for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
if you really value those people and you care for those people, when you get that news that that person has passed away, you know the first response still is nahi nahi kya baat kar raha hai, kab.
Right.
So nahi nahi kya baat kar raha hai is actually denial. It's just that we may be able to move beyond denial very quickly, but the
Yeah.
first stage over there is denial.
Correct.
Right? In our head, when this happens for a fleeting second, and these stages, while they happen sequentially, can happen like it doesn't mean that we will experience all of them. Many a times we are able to move through them really quickly.
Right.
Right? So now to give you like a proper sequential example of how stages of loss works. Let's say there's someone who has lost someone who has passed away.
Correct.
Right? They have not seen the dead body
Right.
of the person who has passed away. Now, if they've
Right.
not seen the dead body, then the chances of denial are very high. In fact, that's one of the reasons why in all our cultures, when people die, there is like a huge, what should I say?
Yeah.
Uh,
There's like rituals around.
Correct. There are like number of rituals that take place. There are people who come to our families, and malab, there would be people who would be asking you to cry, and the moment you stop crying, the next person would come and make you cry again. So it's almost like that people make a lot of effort to ensure that the family members of the person who has passed away cry a lot. And there's a reason for that, because if you've cried enough, you can't remain in denial.
Correct.
You know, I used to wonder as a small child that why when people die in someone's family, we have like a mini, it's kind of a celebration, like you're inviting people, you're offering them food, and then there are so many people who are there. So I would keep wondering that why is all of this being done when someone has been passed away? And eventually later on I realized that that's because it's important for family members to be able to get over that denial, to really recognize and realize that there are so many people who have come for the procession that it can't be unreal.
Correct.
Right?
Right.
So that's the first step. Now,
Right.
when people have not seen the dead body,
Mm-hmm.
they have a reason to believe that the person will come back.
Correct.
Right? Because they've really not got that closure. And that's the
Yeah.
place where denial can actually last really long.
Hmm.
In alternate cases, there are people who will tell you, I've seen the dead body, I know they've passed away, but they're still with me, watching over me, and I can still feel their presence.
Hmm.
Technically, that is also denial. But if that's not interfering with their life and they're able to get on with their life and they feel safer in the company of that person, so that's okay. That's completely brilliant. The
Hmm.
problem is at times people start getting glued to that I can feel their presence, I want to communicate with them, and then they stop communicating with people who are alive in their life in an attempt to try and communicate with people who have died.
Correct.
Right? So that can again create its own set of problems. So these are like categories of denial. And now it's not just for death. Even when I have a very important, let's say I have a very expensive mobile phone that I find I really value. When you lose that mobile phone, isn't the first response नहीं यहीं पे कहीं रखा होगा?
Hmm.
Or my friends may have just picked it up, they are probably taking my case.
Right.
Matlab, I would search my pocket 10 times. If it was not there in the pocket the first time, it would not just magically appear, would it?
Right.
So I'm still checking it again and again. Why? Because it's a state of denial.
Right.
Right? Now, once I'm able to accept that the loss has taken place completely or partially, the next stage is anger, where generally we assign the loss to someone. So in case of mobile phone, I can assign that loss to myself and I can say कि मुझे में अक्ल ही नहीं है. So I am getting angry at myself. Or I can assign it to a mobile phone company कितने महंगे महंगे phone बनाते हैं. Why can't they have a thief detection or a mobile location application by default in the phone?
Right.
right? So that's again like anger towards the mobile company or towards friends or someone else. In case of someone passing away, the anger can be directed towards the person who's passed away. How can they die? Who will take care of the family now? So the anger is directed towards the person who has passed away. It can be directed towards self. Why wasn't I able to take care of them and protect them?
Hmm.
Or it can be directed towards God. How can God do this? How can God take away that person? Or it
Correct.
could be directed towards doctors if someone has
Yes.
passed away in a hospital.
Yeah. A lot of people do that. Yeah.
Right? So that's basically the second stage where they are in a state of anger. Now, once that acknowledgement takes place, is when people start getting into that sad, helpless kind of a state. Ab kya? How would I live my life? That person is no longer there. Mobile is complete, is all gone. All my numbers have gone away with it. How will I ever connect with all my friends? So then we get into like a state of helplessness, sadness that can continue for anywhere between probably a fraction of a second to months. Especially when people have a breakup. Even breakups will fall into the category of grief. Like you are losing
Right.
a relationship, then there's anger directed towards self or the partner or a third person who you
Right.
blame is responsible for the failure of the relationship. And
Right.
then the sadness that how can this happen to me? How can I live my life like this? So that why me question comes.
Right.
Right? Now, this is the trickiest phase. I say trickiest phase because if you're not able to take care of this, the client can actually seep into depression after this. If we don't know how to take care of this.
Right.
And
Right.
then the next stage is where the client recognizes what they need to live for. So in case of someone passing away, it can be that, but I have other family members that I need to take care of. In many cases where one of the partner passes away, it's the children who became like the bargaining tool. That okay, the person who had to die has died, but I have to be in a sane state to take care of my children.
Yeah. In fact, the rituals that you mentioned, all the relatives will gather around and say that, you have to live for them, whosoever is the remaining, people around that person. Right.
Correct.
Correct.
So that becomes a part of bargain. Now, when you are working with clients and when they are able to acknowledge that bargain, in the sense that they are able to accept the bargain, apply the bargain, and they are actually reaching a state where they have been able to help, let's say in this case, the kids take care of themselves and they are able to move on from that loss, then they are in a state of complete acceptance. Now, the way to work with this is to first begin with the bargain. So even before you start looking at helping people resolve their problems with respect to grief, sit with them and ask them what is it in their life right now,
Hmm. Okay.
right? I want to know this because when I make the client go through the entire process, the moment they start getting into their helpless state, I have the bargaining tool available with me
Okay.
so that I can shift their focus from what they have lost to what they need to live for.
Okay.
Okay, the same will apply in case of a failure of a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many of you have actually seen. There was a movie called Ashiki 2. In
Hmm.
that movie, after the actor commits suicide,
Yes.
I think Aditya Roy,
Yeah.
uh, after he commits suicide, Shraddha Kapoor decides to give up her singing completely.
Career. Yeah.
Her singing career completely. It's like it's almost like a rebellion that if he died, I don't want to live a successful life.
Right.
It's then that Aditya Roy's manager comes
Manager.
to her and tells her that he died because he did not want you to throw your career away. So if you do that, his death would be completely in vain. So if not for yourself, to respect the fact that he died for you, you need to continue with your career. And then her career becomes a bargaining tool for her to be able to get over that phase of sadness and helplessness.
Yeah.
So that's actually a very good example of how the right bargaining tool can be used with people so that they can get over their grief.
Hmm. Right.
Now,
Makes sense.
how you do it in a process is this. So the first step is to sit with the client, help them identify what is the bargain. Once they tell you the bargain, to then check whether they are still in denial or not. If the client is completely in denial, they will not come to you for therapy because then there is no reason for them to come to you for therapy. They will only
Correct.
come to you for therapy when they know that something has been lost, but a part of you is still in denial. So they would tell you that I know it happened, but there are times when I still feel it's not happened. Then what you would do is ask them to close their eyes, go back to the time when they recognize the loss taking place. I would ask them to replay that memory in their mind again and again. So if it was the death of someone, the fact that they saw the dead body, and I would make them replay it till they start getting angry. Because when they start getting angry is when I know that the denial phase is over. They can't be angry about something unless when they are still in denial about it.
Right.
Once they get into that angry phase, I would check with them what are they angry about. The anger can be towards anyone. The anger can be about the person who has died, about themselves, about me as a therapist. That why are you asking me to do this again and again?
Correct.
Whoever they have anger with is the person who would be invited into the room so that they can express their anger.
Okay.
And as they start expressing their anger, you will notice them steeping into that state where they're feeling a bit helpless that why did this happen to me? They will have that question, why me? And the moment they bring up that question, you tell them that while you may search for an answer with respect to why me, it's still important for you to recognize why do you also need to move on. And then I would bring in the variants, the bargaining chips. In case children are the bargaining chip, then I would actually bring in the child in the room and ask them to see the child and recognize how it's important for them to be able to get on with their life so that the children can be taken care of. Then I would ask them to literally imagine themselves in a situation in future where they're able to take care of the daily needs of the child, that they can feel sad at times. They may feel that they miss someone or something, which is okay. But that missing is not really interfering with their day-to-day life and with the things that they need to do. And eventually, when we do this future visualization, they go back home, they start applying it in their life, and on a weekly basis, we monitor their progress. And that's how the entire grief process works.
All right.
Okay?
That
So
is
what we have done with grief is we have actually helped them move through all the stages. Also, so we have actually helped them go through all of these stages.
okay. All right. Nitin Trinka is saying a client disclosed in therapy that he used to dislike his father when he was alive. And as per him, mother used to pull him towards her, be too affectionate and loving before, and not let him go close to the father due to their own issues with each other. Now, 2 years back, father had a sudden death. He is unable to cope with it, feeling guilty for not spending enough time with father. He hates his mother and blames her now. Mother, he feels mother is not just bothered about him now, she's not even affectionate like before. Even after working for long, his guilt is not going. How do I work further?
Okay. So, Priyanka, I don't know when you say that after working for long in terms of what work the client has done. So that's kind of difficult for me to answer. So I'm going to keep that aside that he has worked or she has worked for too long. I would suggest what is the line of therapy that I would work with the client. And in most cases with issues where someone has passed away, hypnodrama combined with cord cutting and future pacing is generally good enough, because what happens with hypnodrama is they get a closure where they can speak to the father, they can say sorry to the father for not being able to be with the father, to actually have that final conversation where they can get closure. This is true both in terms of a relationship breakup and death of someone, because many times people will come and tell you there are things that I wanted to say, there are things that I wanted to clarify, there are things that I wanted to apologize for that I have not been able to do. And that absence of closure prevents them from moving on. So, generally speaking, one session of hypnodrama, before that would obviously be identification of the problem, the future pace, the identification of what kind of a future they are looking for. Then going into hypnodrama would give you a major clearing factor. After that's done, in the next week, depending upon what the client says, we can take up next what needs to be done. But generally, with issues where someone has passed away and client is feeling guilty about something, hypnodrama is a 1 or 2 session work, and that's enough. Again, I have worked with at least 7 or 8 clients like this, and I've never had a situation with the client not being able to get over it later on. As far as the mother is concerned, that's a different issue, in the sense that while hypnodrama would be used, there are other things that I would need to do over there. One is I would use a perceptual position process that I shared earlier, so that the client can see if they can change their perspective about the mother and learn to relook at what's happening from the point of view of the mother, because eventually the mother has also lost someone. Irrespective of the equation that she had with the father, they were still together with each other, right? So I would help the son, see if they can understand certain things from the mother's perspective that they were not able to understand earlier. That perspective would bring in at least an intellectual acknowledgement of the fact that, all right, the mother can do whatever she wants to do with her life and she has her own challenges, which then brings the onus on the client that what do I want to do with my life. And that's where the hypnodrama with the mother and the future pacing in terms of how do they want to live their life and where would they want to focus their energies on rather than on their mother would come in. Again, this doesn't mean that we are trying to make them like completely lovey-dovey with the mother and that they completely are in a situation where they don't feel anything about the mother. It's just bringing them to a place where they are in a state of calmness and they're able to acknowledge and accept the fact that the mother is a separate person and she has a right to do what she wants to do with her life and the way she wants to treat him. And again, hypnodrama combined with anchoring will be very useful over there.
Perfect. Hope, Trinka, you have your answer. Then Prashanti is asking, a friend works with cancer patients, mortality rates are high. She constantly falls in and out of grief, which is affecting her mentally and physically. What can she do to work on her grief? As it's a job, she can't run away from the deaths of her patients. How can she probably shield herself?
So, Prashanti, I actually don't think this is as much about therapy as about skill building on part of the therapist. And this is actually one of the things that we keep saying, and I'm repeating it again. I understand a lot of you may have been trained as practitioners, you may have gone through multiple courses, and you may have also gone through years of experience, right? But there are certain things which I actually think should be mandatory in terms of any training program that you're going through. And if that has not been covered for you in whatever trainings you've gone through, whatever training your friend has gone through, please ask her to go through a training program where she is able to learn to distance herself from a therapy. It's more of a skill and not about therapy. It's a skill that a therapist needs to develop, right? I can say what we do for us, again, anchoring and a lot of these things come into play because now it's almost like those states are anchored for me. But when I step into a therapy, I know that this is a different state that I'm in. When I step out of a therapy, I can leave everything that's happened in the therapy
She's a doctor,
to,
not a therapist.
oh, okay, if she's a doctor, then probably her going through a training program where she can learn how to distance herself uh, from that grief is very important. So I would still not classify it as a therapy process simply because it's not. See, the thing is, this is a part and parcel of a job, right? And because it's a part and parcel of a job, this is like a skill building that she's looking at. And therefore, I would probably recommend a training program more than a therapy. If this was the client said that there's one particular patient that I worked with that I've not been able to get over, or the loss of
Right.
whom I've not been able to get over, then I would have put it in a therapy format. But if the doctor comes and says that this is a part and parcel of my job and I need to do this regularly, then this is still skill building.
Right. And Nitin, what about all the doctors and nurses and healthcare workers who are working with COVID patients right now? So mortality may not be as high, but the risks of working with such people, and if I don't know whether any of our viewers know anyone like that, but what if? So you would again recommend a training program for them?
See, my because this is a skill that they require any which ways as a part of their job and as a part of their profession. I
Yes.
would recommend training more than anything else. Also, with doctors, while they may not require doctors, nurses, they may not require extensive experience in counseling skills. I actually think that certain basic skills, as far as therapy is concerned, should be a part of every helping profession. Whether you are a doctor, you are a nurse, whether you are a psychiatrist, whether you are a mental health practitioner, whether you are a social worker, because you're working with cases or people where you are going to come across situations uh, where you will not be able to work with clients always. And the clients may want to share certain things which can leave some amount of impact on you emotionally. I would rather really suggest that all of these should have be mandatory as a part of their training programs. I understand why it's not a part of their training programs in the sense, even like with medicines, while they're going through years of experience, I really think maybe adding another 2 months of training so that they are able to understand the psychology and they are able to distance themselves, not in
Right.
terms of distance like they can't empathize with their clients, but be able to put it in brackets where they know when their sessions end as a doctor or as a therapist and when their life starts.
Right.
Right? And I really think this should be a part of their training. Yeah, while if that's not possible for whatever reasons, can they come for a therapy? The answer is yes. But basically, what they are supposed to develop in a training program, the therapist would have to help them do it in a one-to-one setup.
Okay. So
I hope
managing
that
their own,
answers all your questions.
so and that would revolve around managing their own mental state, right?
That would revolve around managing their own mental state.
Perfect. Perfect. Uh, I think you've spoken about grief, and if there are any questions, I would request everyone who wants to ask a question, has any doubts or comments, please share them now so that we can answer them.
Also, when you were talking about grief, just remember that these steps are not sequential. Which
Right.
means it's not that the client, if the client is angry, then they cannot be in denial. If the client is in depression or sadness, then they cannot be angry. Generally, especially in cases of grief, people flirt with multiple stages simultaneously. So someone can be partially in denial, partially in an angry state, and partially in a YME zone.
Okay.
So when you're doing a therapy with them, you need to be able to help them complete each of those stages. And that's where when I
All right.
spoke about making them visualize that scene where someone has passed away, when they've heard that news that the other person has passed away, over and over again is important because you want the denial to be over completely. When they're angry, you don't want them to you don't want to console them while they're angry. You want them to be able to express their anger completely, and that's why hypnodrama becomes important. And then when they're in that YME state, you don't want them to feel pity for themselves. You want them to start focusing on what they need to live for. So you need to like complete each of those stages, and only because the client seems to show symptoms of the second or the third stage doesn't mean that their earlier stages are over. You need to talk to them to be able to recognize whether the earlier stages are over or not.
Perfect. No more questions, Nitin. I don't see any. Do you see any
Perfect. So we have
questions?
actually overshot again. We are almost 11:30 now.
Mhm.
So if you have any of you have any questions that we have not addressed, then please feel free to comment it tomorrow in the when you start. I would share the link. We are now creating. I would be creating the link for that live post earlier, maybe by tomorrow, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock in the morning. And then after that, it will be available on the iChar's page. So if any of you have questions, you can just visit the iChar's page, the appropriate live post, schedule post, and you can start asking us questions so that we know what questions you have, and we would surely answer them in in tomorrow's episode. In the episode tomorrow, we are going to focus on psychosomatic issues.
Perfect. Nitin, Anu is saying, please share link as you discussed before. I am unable to watch.
Uh, Anu, can you please share the link was regarding what? Because I've shared a couple of links, so I'm not sure which link you're talking about. Uh, but if you could just remind me of of what we were discussing, then I can share the link with you.
Yeah, which link are you referring to, Anu? If you can tell us that.
So this is the link to the ICAS Facebook page where the schedules generally go up. So by 12 o'clock tomorrow, you should be able to have that post over there, and then you can share your questions on that post if you would like to. Oh, by the way, we are also starting another webinar series from tomorrow onwards, 4 p.m. to 5 p.m., where we have specialists coming up and sharing their concerns. Sorry, talking about their experiences and sharing their tips on how you can benefit from the different therapies that they're using. The episode tomorrow is on mindfulness. So
And
if
it will
any of
be
you are
available at the same link, Nitin, the one that you just shared.
correct, so it will be posted on the same link. Same link.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Right?
And because I don't see any more questions, I think it's time to call it an episode. So thank you so much
So
for answering patiently. And thank you everyone for tuning in and being there, asking questions, seeking clarifications. So over and out for tonight. Good night.
So thank you, Mamta.
Tomorrow,
Thank you, everyone else. I'll see
same
you all
time,
tomorrow.
same place, 10 p.m. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.